Hi, and welcome everyone back to another episode of the Alex and Mo podcast. And tonight we have the APTA CEO, Justin Moore. Welcome, Justin, to our show.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be a fun night.
Yep. And if you guys are watching on YouTube, both Alex and I are wearing Manchester United shirts. They belong to the English Premier League, even though they're not doing quite well this season.
Hey, top four. Top four with the new coach is very
Yeah, we've had a few rough years, but back in the day when I fell in love with Manchester United, we won pretty much all the championships in Europe, and I've been a fan since. So we just found out that Justin is a growing fan of the English Premier League, but he supports Liverpool.
Absolutely.
And they are our rivals. But they do have a slogan that I love, which is YNWA, you never walk alone. And as your role as the CEO of the APTA, I feel my personal belief is that the APTA is there to help us as members feel like we're never walking alone. So combining your love for sport and your leadership abilities, how would you say everything in your life has prepared you for this moment to make us believe that we're never going to walk alone?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, associations by their very design are about bringing the collective voice of the profession together to make change and to help the profession grow and prosper. And that's what the association's done. And as a physical therapist, my career has been really, how do I help individuals do that? But now, how do I help this community of physical therapists and physical therapist assistants really come together, create a community, and advocate for change? And so we do believe in, we'll never walk alone. We're one community. And so hopefully we can put that into action and continue to grow this profession. This profession's had a remarkable history, but it needs to grow. We have challenges, we have pressure points, and we need to sort of address those and continue to grow.
So, Justin, first and foremost, thank you for taking the time out of what I'm sure is a busy schedule to be with us. We really appreciate it. I want to go back before where we are today and tell me how the journey was, to become a physical therapist, what kind of led you to that? And then how does one start as a physical therapist and make this journey to now being the CEO of our national association?
Yeah, absolutely. I was fortunate. Both my parents came from the disability community. And so my father was an administrator in a state-run hospital in the state of Iowa that served individuals with developmental disabilities. So I grew up around parents who were really in careers helping people with those disabilities. My mother was a special ed teacher. So that introduced me to the profession. I also was fortunate enough to have family friends whose son was a physical therapist. And so those were really those early connection points that led me to the profession. And so as I was looking at a career, it just was natural to, have that history and have those connections that came together to say, this is something I want to try as a career and as a profession. And so that's what led me to physical therapy. In physical therapy, I really had a unique interest both in sports and in developmental disabilities. So I sort of combined those and practiced a little bit in orthopedics, a little bit in developmental disabilities or pediatrics. Early on in my career, I kind of got bit by the advocacy bug. I was in Michigan at the time. They were promoting, trying to work on direct access. They had no form of direct access in Michigan. So I joined the legislative committee, got very involved in trying to do that at a state level, which led me to APTA. I came to APTA back in 1999 and on basically a short-term assignment. I was brought in. The big issue of the day was protecting physical therapists' ability to perform manipulation. And that was a state legislative issue. And they wanted to bring a physical therapist in to help prepare people to testify, the difference between grade 5 mobilization, manipulation, all the different techniques of that to really protect physical therapists' ability to perform the whole range of manual therapy skills. So long answer to your question, but that's sort of my journey that led me to APTA, came up through the lobby ranks, and then over the last 7 years have been in the chief executive function.
Okay, so you said you were from Iowa.
Correct.
So Iowa was just in the national tournament, played against LSU.
Yeah.
I know you have a very close relationship with our former APTA president. So did you guys have a wager going on?
She tried to bait me into a wager, and I'm glad I didn't see my text. So in all fairness, both her and Bob Rowe tried to get me to, but I was actually in England on spring break. So I missed I was delayed and got their text. But I think Sharon was going to have me have to dress up as the LSU coach at the next annual conference.
Oh no!
And she was very colorful in her outfits, and I think that was what I was going to have to do if I lost. But luckily, the transatlantic time zone saved me from having to embarrass myself. But no, I was happy to see Sharon's LSU Tigers win. What an exciting run of sports in the women's NCAA this year, and just how much interest that drove toward the sport, and just and showed the the unique nature of the women's game and how exciting it is right now.
Most definitely.
Absolutely. So earlier you mentioned about kind of leading the charge for this community of physical therapists and having some growing to continue to do to evolve, that there's some things that we need to address. What do you feel is probably the biggest obstacle that we face as a profession right now?
I think the biggest obstacle is probably the public's awareness of our full scope of practice and our full impact. I think we're still underestimated. And sort of go to a basketball analogy, I heard us once described as sort of the scrappy point guard. We're still hustling after every ball on the floor, sort of getting, but I think we're underestimated as a profession and underutilized. And so I think if we can grow the public awareness of the profession and the different settings in which we practice, the different conditions in which we can help people get their full potential, I think that's the biggest obstacle we have. We obviously have obstacles on payments, administrative burdens that make it difficult to practice for our PTs. But I think if we can drive demand through the consumers, we're going to have a better leverage with insurers, with Medicare, and really let the consumers be our biggest advocates.
Speaking of consumers, we had Colleen
Rapp, yes.
Which I'm not sure if you're familiar with her or so, obviously big consumer advocate there. She will scream physical therapy at the mountaintops all day, every day. And we definitely thank her for that. Many times on our show, I've always used the analogy that we as a profession sit at the kiddie table, that we don't get to sit with our parents, figuratively, and have the big meals where the big conversations are had, that we just tend to sit on that kiddie table eating our little chicken nuggets while everybody else gets to have these conversations. So I tend to agree with you that I think that we are underutilized and undervalued. The approach of going to the consumer, I think, is in line with what I would say most professions and different markets are doing, is going to the consumer, letting them make the decisions for whatever particular product or service you're offering. With direct access, and even still in some states and for some populations needing those physician referrals, how do you feel that can the consumer impact those physicians to say, hey, we need to get more therapy? My patient says that this happened in therapy. Am I a believer? Can we have that impact to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can. It's a 1-2 punch. I think if we raise consumer awareness of the profession, they'll advocate with their other healthcare providers, whether that's their physician, their PA, or their nurse practitioner, so they can advocate that. Or hopefully we'll get greater laws that allow for direct access, and they can advocate for themselves and come to physical therapists directly. And we're seeing great progress with that. We just had a number of states, Virginia, here in our home state, just had a fairly restrictive direct access law, went back to the state legislature this year and achieved a victory to get more unrestricted direct access. A bill in Missouri is sitting on the governor's desk, waiting to be signed. And Missouri had one of the most restrictive states regarding physician referral, and they're going to move more to an open access state. And I think it is that 1-2 punch of educating the consumers, but also eliminating the legal and regulatory and even insurance boundaries that are sort of holding us back as well. But your analogy is we sometimes are our biggest critic, and we need to flip that and be our biggest champion. And so and this profession is ultra competitive. Sometimes that competitiveness is driven at each other versus at consumers, which we want to understand and know who we are.
If we take a page from CrossFit and other fitness industry, they go directly to the consumers for them to make that choice. The power is in choosing. Yes, you give them options, but there's confusion behind our message, in that there is no like one set thing that this is what PT is. So when you became a physical therapist, what was your idea of what physical therapists do?
Yeah, it's in the simplest way I've ever heard it described is physical therapists are really the individual who helps somebody who has something they can't do learn how to do it. And so how do we become that partner with patients to really take them from a state that is not optimal for them and help them get that optimal state? And that could be as simple as being able to lift a grandchild, being able to run a 5K, whatever that is. What is it that's keeping somebody from their full potential and quality of life? And how do we bridge that gap? And so that's the way I've always thought about the profession. But I do think you articulate very well. One of our challenges is our scope of practice is diverse. It's wide. And so sometimes it's hard to really say, that we're very specific, low back pain, or we're sports injuries, or we're falls prevention. Whatever those different things are, we have a tough time putting the profession in a really clean box. And I think that's actually good, because our box is really, or our real message is, how do we help people get from a state that they're uncomfortable with or in pain on to a state that they want to be, and being that partner.
Yeah, that's really the underlying message. And I think we need to publicize the victories more, because we don't. And that's where the criticism comes in, because people aren't aware. They don't know. So blast it out. Boast. Hey, we just got this. We just got that done.
I think that's really a symptom of, PT was recognized in the healthcare system very early, but it was recognized as post-injury, post-impairment, and came with a doctor's referral. Really going direct to the consumer is probably a decade old for physical therapy. 90% of patients came with a referral. We're seeing that drastically change. And I think COVID actually accelerated that. So people got comfortable with telehealth and going direct to all types of healthcare providers through that. But then they also missed having that personal on-site care. So it was almost a double win, because consumers got comfortable on being their own advocate, but they also recognized the unique value. So it wasn't that one was better than the other. They saw the ability to access care when and where they needed it, but then they saw this value of physical therapy, both in the digital environment or virtually, but also when they do need it in person, how do they get those services?
Absolutely. The perception, true or false, whether you agree or not, at least amongst physical therapists, is the APTA should be doing more to kind of lead this charge, right? So if we're saying we need to get to the consumer, we need to bombard the consumer with everything that we do, all the benefits that we bring, what, if you're able to share, is the APTA doing or has planned or is looking to do as a way to kind of initiate that movement? Because a lot of times talking to physical therapists, you'll hear, the APTA, they should be the ones, spearheading any sort of campaign, or why can't we, put dollars or whatever, resources into doing this. And again, I don't know. I personally don't feel like it's up to the APTA per se to be the champion of that. I think that they should be resources to help us.
Mm-hmm.
But like Colleen came on our show, it's like as an individual PT, Mo, myself, and everybody else watching, like you've got to put your victories out on blast, because my victories are going to be different than Mo's victories, but they all push towards the same end result, which is what we do and how we help people. But again, for those people that believe that the APTA needs to be the one, leading the charge, is there anything going on that you guys have planned or are looking to do?
Yeah, and my first response is we absolutely should be engaging at a high level. And so those members are right. APTA should be, promoting the public's awareness and demand for PT as much as it possibly can. And we could always do more. What we presently did is, we have been, since we relabeled our consumer initiative Choose PT, we've been doing public service announcements every year. And those are done in video format, but they also sometimes have print mechanisms as well, which really try to inform the consumer of the different things in which you can go to a physical therapist for. And so it is a rising tide lifts all boats, is how do we continue to get those in and get those PSAs out on a regular basis. But more importantly, how do we give those resources to local physical therapists to be able to tell their story? And so Mo is part of our media spokesperson network. And we have a cadre of PTs who are looking to try to get placements in media. We also are looking at how do we begin to take not only APTA's resources, but best practices that have been learned by PTs around the country and repackage those into toolkits and resources that PTs can use to promote their services locally. So we need to do more training. We need to have more collateral available for people that they could put their local PT clinic on it. And then we need to do more putting, ads in the New York Times, putting things on YouTube as a PSA. It is really, how do we continue to put as much effort to this, because it is what's going to drive demand for PT, which also will help us on the advocacy for better payment and better, eliminating of the admin burdens. Consumer-directed initiatives are, as I said earlier, about a decade old. So we need to constantly figure out how to do more and do it better as we provide those resources. But the key thing, and whenever we've studied this and asked consumers, where's their number one source they learn about physical therapy? It's former patients. So the number one source of what people hear about physical therapy is family and friends who have had physical therapy telling our good story. And so that is our biggest PR and we see it all the time is, people will say it's word of mouth. And so we could spend a couple $1 million doing a Super Bowl ad. It's not as effective as if we equip the 200,000 plus physical therapists around the country to tell their story better. And if we can do that, we're going to have a bigger impact than a Super Bowl ad.
Most definitely. To me, the APTA is like the vehicle, and its members are the different parts to help the vehicle function. And we need to do our part as well to make that car go.
And I think one of the things that's really cool is when I started lobbying on Capitol Hill, I bet you 4 out of 5 offices I'd go in didn't know what a physical therapist was. Through our advocacy efforts over the last 20 years, and really this is probably a positive effect of the therapy cap, through our advocacy efforts, by the time I don't lobby as much today as I did a couple years ago. When I would go to a Hill office now, they know what a physical therapist is. And so of that 435 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, we have blasted them with a PT message for 20 years. They not only know what physical therapy is, generally, and this is the big victory, they know the physical therapist from their district. So they will say to me, even when I was lobbying, they say, Justin, that's great that you want me to sign on to that bill, but I need to check with my physical therapist in Tampa. And I knew when I left that office, that was a win, because they had a connection to a local physical therapist, which was such a stronger advocacy message for us than the paid lobbyist telling them to sign on to a bill.
That's great to hear. That's definitely great to hear. So, I mean, I know it's not your job to convince people who aren't members to become members, but use this as your elevator pitch. How do you convince? Should I put Alex on the spot?
You can put me on blast. I'm not a member.
How would you convince Alex to become a member?
Well, just in a very interesting standpoint is we're only as strong as our members, and the word association is very important to who we are. American Physical Therapy Association is that association allows us to take a little bit of money from a lot of people and then package it into advocacy, PR, and the efforts that we seek. And so a little bit of, and that collectiveness of the community comes together that really gives us the resources that we spend on PR, advocacy, and those things. So we're only as strong as the collective group comes together as the body of physical therapists. And it's tough because physical therapy is rough out there right now. Its payment's been static. The income potential of physical therapists has been tough over the last several years. So we have to continue to show value to those members, that the money that they're giving to us is returning patients to their door and getting them the advocacy wins they need. And so it's a mutual relationship between APTA and its members, that we show them value and relevance, and they then give us their investment that we hope to show a return on. So we have work to do on that, and we're going to continue to try to earn every member we can. But it is a joint partnership of us delivering that value and them giving us their trust.
Absolutely. I mean, something you mentioned there obviously was the income potential for some of our younger members, right? So, which leads me to our student PTs, the current academic process, and how the APTA fits into that equation. One of the big things, obviously, that has been kind of in the news going around is the student loan stuff. Mm-hmm. You hear from a lot of PT students, hey, I'm having to take in excess of $100,000 in student loans to get through my 3 years of a doctorate degree. And then I come out and my earning potential is X. Obviously, so many different variables and factors that go into what X actually is. But what, if anything, is the APTA doing to help, whether through education, through advocacy, things of that nature, to kind of help with that? Because it seems to be a big concern, and I would almost say a big problem as a barrier to get more of not only more people in the schools, but more of those that graduate to turn into active members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I would say the cost of education is one of the biggest issues that needs to be addressed in physical therapy. And it's a multifaceted issue and tough. But our board of directors a couple of years ago added an element to our strategic plan around stewardship. And really, how does this board of directors and this leadership steward the profession so that it has the opportunity for the next generation of the opportunity we all enjoyed? And so with that spirit and that intent of stewardship, the board of directors has really attacked this from all angles. What can we do on the advocacy side to provide greater access to student loan forgiveness? So we have legislation that would add physical therapy to the National Health Service Corps that would provide student loan repayment for people who chose to participate in that program. We just passed the Allied Health PT, or the Allied Health Workforce Act in last Congress, that provides some student loan for people from underrepresented minorities to practice in the profession. So we're attacking that to give them options to help reduce that student loan. We're also doing a lot of education. So we have a financial resource center on our website where we've partnered with different entities that can help for members get a small reduction in their consolidating of their loans, but also provides them training on financial literacy. And so that's another thing we're doing. And then the last thing we're doing is we're going to be aggressive about educating our future students about the cost of education and trying to choose programs that meet their needs financially. And so transparency around the real cost of education. And so that we can, there's been some studies done that if you graduate with more than $150,000 in student loan, that the net present value of your P degree is not what it should be. So how do we help educate, them to choose and make decisions and pick the programs that provide them the best return on their investment? And, I was looking at data earlier this week, there's still a reasonable cost of PT education when you look at the average, but there are programs that are in the high six figures, and that's just unsustainable. And so how do we do this over time to create a more financially, viable profession, whether that's greater payment for the providers or, addressing the cost of education so they don't come out burdened by that debt?
Well, the cost of education to me is a barrier to entry, especially for, I'm from the Caribbean, Alex is from South America. So for an international student coming to the US to study, it's going to be crazy. And
right.
We don't have the opportunity to get financial aid. So it's a barrier to entry for international students to come here to study, even for other marginalized groups to afford getting a DPT degree. So there's going to be some dwindling somewhere along the line of underrepresented groups in physical therapy. So something has to be done.
Yeah, we've made it's still not great in the profession, but we've made some significant gains of attracting a more diverse population to our applicant pool. If the cost is too high, they're going to not choose our profession. And then we're not going to be able to serve the communities in a very equitable way. And so the cost of education is such a big issue, not at just an individual level, but at a population health level. And we have to be able to do that. And as both of you know, physical therapy and physiotherapy is an international profession. And we need to embrace that, because a lot of the professions and competitors that we have in the U.S. healthcare system aren't as international as this profession is. And we need to embrace our world community, and both from a research standpoint, but also how do we attract people who, had education in other countries as well. And that's always been a strong part of this profession. I'd hate to see that lost because our education and practice systems are so restrictive.
Yes, most definitely.
You mentioned that I'm inferring here that you guys at least look at the data in terms of what the cost of education is across the country in all the programs that are accredited and stuff like that. So you mentioned there's about 6% that tend to be six figures and above. For those types of programs, do you, and better yet, can you reach out to these programs and say, hey, this is our data showing us this is where everybody else seems to be. You guys seem to be up here, and letting them know how it can become a barrier and things like that. I guess, is there dialogue between the APTA and those programs that in the APTA's view is probably on the higher end to try to figure out, or just say, hey, you guys are on the edge there, is making it a little bit harder for us here. Does that happen?
Well, right now, we're at the very part of this dialogue, and it's just a recent requirement that they have to report the data. So we're just now starting to see the full scope of almost 300 programs, reporting in that data. It was in the past, it's always been up to that individual to do all that research. So we will begin to have, as of June this year, we'll begin to have sort of the range of programs from the lowest cost program to the highest program. We hope that transparency will begin to drive some consumer behavior and begin to drive some self-correction in the system. What we hope doesn't happen is programs that are below the average use it as a justification to raise tuition. And so there's a lot of concerns when you put this data out into the market. What behavior will it drive? And just to give you an example, the average in-state public is like 69, I forget what it is, 69,000. So don't quote me on the exact number. Well, if every program under 69 all of a sudden starts charging 68, 69,000, we just raise the cost of education. What we want is those ones charging 250, charging 175 to come back into a normal right? Or if frankly, as the applicant pool gets more competitive, they don't choose those programs. And from that standpoint, so will there be a market correction? And we hope so. We hope that we get back to a more reasonable, tuition cost for some of those outliers that exist on the top end.
Do you think like the more programs, I think you mentioned there are like 300 already. That's a lot compared to when I was applying for schools.
We've had enormous growth in programs, which has been positive because we have a good standard through CAPTI. And so it's been positive. They've met the standard. We're growing as a profession very rapidly, about 12,000 graduates every year. And so that's up, 2010 was, mid 6,000s. We're almost doubled in 13 years, the number of graduates. The goal is to do that growth very smart so that you keep the quality high and that we keep, the standards very, very good. And so we're growing as a profession. And I think as long as, we're producing a high quality workforce, hopefully we can continue to see the profession grow and prosper.
Man, where are these PTs? Because I'm hearing from owners that they're struggling to hire. So where can we find them? Yeah,
I think I've been looking a lot at we do have a labor issue going on in physical therapy right now. If you look at it, practices need more clinicians. A lot of them report, high vacancy rates, a lot of trouble recruiting. And so we can continue to, graduate and continue to feed that workforce. But I think one of the things we're trying to get a better handle on is what's happening to our current workforce. Are PTs leaving the workforce post-COVID? Are they choosing other career paths later in their career? And we think that is part of it, that we're seeing some attrition at a pretty high rate in the current workforce that we're not going to be able to replace with current grads. So we need to address both. We need to keep high-quality pipeline issues producing PTs into the field, but we also need to make sure our current workforce is healthy and well and is staying in the profession and not leaving the profession, because otherwise, if we're just constantly replacing it with new grads, that's going to be, it's going to be a bigger hill to climb if we have as many people leaving the profession as we have entering every year.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm seeing like after a few years, more therapists want to enter a non-clinical role. So is APTA affording clinicians that opportunity to assume non-clinical role? Because your role is non-clinical, but you're Absolutely. Still advocating for the profession. So how can a current therapist wanting to do something like advocating and getting involved in non-clinical stuff to benefit the profession do so?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting what's going on in some PTs taking on healthcare leadership roles and non-clinical roles. We've seen more PTs in CEO seats in rehab hospitals and rural hospitals. And so we are seeing the profession not only grow in its clinical expertise and impact, we're beginning to see physical therapists recognized as healthcare leaders. And I think that's very positive for the profession. So as you guys both know, people seeking non-clinical roles is a lot of interest. I probably get more calls on that than I do on a lot of things right now. Is how do you go into healthcare administration? How do you go into owning your own business? How do you go into, consulting? And so I think that's exciting as long as we're also meeting the patient's need. So how do we balance that so that we can, and I think we're the 5th largest healthcare provider in the United States. So nurses, physicians, social work, pharmacy, then PT. And so as we grow this profession, we do want people to take on healthcare leadership roles. And, the CEO of Memorial Hermann Rehab Hospital in Houston, physical therapist. At Good Shepherd in Atlanta, physical therapist. Kessler Rehab, physical therapist. And so we're really seeing, and what I like, and this comes from my advocacy, we have, I think, 11 PTs who are now state legislators around this country. And so including my friend Julie Rogers, who's the state rep in Michigan, from Kalamazoo, Michigan, where I used to live. She is now that sitting she's chairwoman of the health committee in the Michigan House of Representatives. That's a physical therapist in healthcare leadership. And we love those non-clinical roles when they're still contributing to the profession, still choosing APTA as their professional home and also contributing in different roles around their communities.
See, Alex, that's sitting at the big table.
Yeah. So we
That
need
is,
more
I
than
mean,
11.
But you know, it's all great stuff to hear. I mean, honestly, wasn't aware of any of that, but we got to start somewhere, right?
Yep.
Like we can't just expect to go from the bottom straight to the top. That's not going to happen. We've got to start establishing ourselves in these smaller. I say that it's really not small when you get to even that level, but in these smaller arenas to that then get the credibility to continue to rise, right? Because now when we have these PTs who are CEOs and state representatives, there's our voice. There is our voice to everybody else who doesn't know or isn't aware of what we bring to the table. Earlier you had mentioned that there's a lot of competition within our profession. And I think that's our biggest hurdle, I believe, because we're more consumed with, is it manual therapy? Is it placebo and all this other stuff instead of coming as a united front to say, look, whether it's either one, like we're helping the patient. And that's ultimately our goal. Get them better so that then they can get back to doing what they love to do and tell everybody how great it was that the experience that they had with their local physical therapist.
Yeah, you're right on. It's we got to focus a lot on building each other up and building the profession up versus tearing it down. And I think your point about the kiddie table, just to give you a reference point, there's hundreds of nurses in state legislatures. There's 11 physical therapists. There's 0 physical therapists in the U.S. Congress. There's a doc caucus. So there's enough doctors that they actually have a caucus in the U.S. Congress. And that's powerful because they know healthcare. So I love that doctors are in the U.S. Congress. On Wednesday, we have Dr. Bouchon, who's a cardiothoracic surgeon, speaking to our members. And it's great to have somebody of his experience, a surgeon, who's in the U.S. Congress. I want physical therapists telling that story in the U.S. Congress in the near future. So those 11 state legislators, hopefully one of them jumps from that kiddie table to the big table, and we can get them here in D.C. and get them, contributing not only to the growth of our profession, but really having that health lens on all policy and how we can make more accessible communities, more equitable healthcare. PTs can benefit in that policy body at a high level.
Well,
Absolutely.
I have to give you credit, Justin, and members of the APTA board. Every time I visit the new APTA headquarters, it's like a breath of fresh air as compared to what I had considered the dungeon before. But basically that building is walking the talk that we talk about, the energy of PT, making it accessible to walk, to ride. So with clinics, we see a lot of people doing like the hybrid models now. Is there any way we can get members to start designing their clinics and practices to incorporate that so that the consumer can always have that visual that physical therapy is about living life and moving?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing clinicians can do is be involved in their community. And they might have a brick and mortar practice, or they might have a concierge practice. They might have a home health practice. Regardless of their practice, getting out in that community and engaging people in how to stay healthy and well is going to be the biggest way we live our mission. And we only added building a community to our mission statement in 2018. So it's only 5 years old, but really trying to bring PT to the community is where we're going to be able to live our best lives as physical therapists. And a lot of times that's volunteering at 5Ks, doing fall clinics at senior centers. It's, I did career fairs last week and, went and talked about physical therapists in high schools and really introducing them to the profession. And I think that's where we can best walk the talk or walk the walk and talk the talk. It is one of the things that's been great is I think home health therapists and private practices are naturally inclined to be in that community. We also have school-based therapists that are in the schools. I think when you see our practices in those environments, that is really, really living our best PR.
We definitely are walking billboards for the profession, and every interaction that we have with consumers, we have to leave that lasting impression that physical therapy works. Great. And that's what they need to choose. So
I'll tell a quick story. I'm getting physical therapy right now. So I have a therapist, even though I have a license, even though I'm a physical therapist, my dentist remind me he doesn't clean his own teeth. And so, when he said that to me, it was sort of a cold glass of water to the face. But I'm a runner, and so I sort of get my back and my hip mobility is pretty not very good. So bad habits for over years, and I need a PT. And so I can, most of the time I can self-manage and stretch and do things, but every once in a while I need that expert to see me and help me stay because I'll be really cranky if I don't get my run in. And so my PT is good for everyone around here. Is he keeps me running, and that's good for everybody.
So you mentioned doing career fairs, and I had seen on your Twitter timeline that you had been at a local high school speaking. You have a high school aged son who plays sports, soccer specifically, and that's how the whole Liverpool Manchester United thing came about. Yeah. But is he interested? Does he ask, "Hey, Dad, like, what is it that you do?" That kind of stuff. Because, I feel like when as a parent or an adult who's around their own kids or nieces, nephews, whatever the case may be, like that's an early introduction. Now, I'm sure you probably would want him to be a physical therapist. Maybe you're like, no, avoid it at all costs, whatever the case may be. But do those questions come up? Because, obviously if he talks about it to his friends, his teammates and stuff like that, again, that's that word of mouth to the consumer in a different light, whether they need the services or they want to join the profession.
Yeah. It's interesting. My son is very interested in his own health and wellness. So he wants to know how to self-manage and how to treat and take care of himself. So he wants to know how to stretch. He wants to do the right things, the right agility skills. So he improves as an athlete, but also doesn't get hurt. He's also informed me he has no interest in being a healthcare professional. So he has interest in it so he doesn't get hurt. And so his motivation is to stay on the field. His motivation is not to go into physical therapy as a career. So that's sort of funny, but he gets a little too much healthcare at home. My mom, my wife is a dietitian. So we have, so he gets the nutrition and physical activity coming from both sides. Listen. And so right now, I don't know if he'll later choose an interest in healthcare, but he's very interested in how does he stay fit for soccer. And he will see, and if he gets, a ding or an injury, a knock, as they'll say in soccer, he gets a knock in a game. He wants to know what to do, and he'll come home and ask me, do I need to ice it first? Do I need to wrap it? Do I need to stretch it? So he has a high respect for what physical therapists do because of his exposure to us. But he also will joke and say, if I need a physical therapist, I'm going to go to somebody other than my dad.
Fair enough. They don't listen to us anyway. So, but talk about the unique setup for him as an athlete. Your dad's physical therapist. Your mom's a dietitian. I mean, like that almost feels like a Cristiano Ronaldo, but in your own house. Like you can just train and eat and be set up for success and just hope you have the God-given talent to go with it.
My wife's also a mean cook, so we eat well too. So
that's good. What position does your son play?
He's been playing both midfield, and then this year he's played because of need. He's played center back a little bit. So he's gotten a little bit bigger. He's about 2 inches taller than I am. And with that size, he's moved a little bit further back in the lineup. And so he's playing a little bit of center back, a little bit of holding mid, where last year he was attacking mid. So he's sort of playing, which has been good for him. I don't think he enjoys it as much, but he's had to learn how to play defense. And that's always good. And I think at his age, at 16, it's really good if they play every position.
Yeah, to me, that's the best position, though. It's the best position because you get to see the whole field. You analyze everything. You shout out orders like get back, go forward. So he's basically in control of the game.
Well, and I was just gonna say that I'm
Like the coach on the field.
As a center back, you're the quarterback of
Yeah.
almost the team because you do see it all. Now you brought up your wife. I'm a big proponent on this show of how important having a supportive spouse partner is in our journey, in my journey as a physical therapist and doing the podcast and everything else that that I take on. I can't do without her support. How has your wife played a part in your ability to perform your duties for the APTA, which in turn help us, to do that? Because to have a family and to be able to take on professional tasks and personal tasks, like that's a lot to do on your own.
Yeah, well, she's a heck of a lot smarter than I am, so that's the first step. And so she is not only smarter, she's a wise counselor. She is also our rudder in our family. So she's the steady force. I'm a little, as you guys can probably tell, I'm a pretty emotional leader. I like to, I was a wrestler, so go hard, go fast. She's the one who provides a little more stability, thoughtfulness, leads a little more with the heart. And so that balance to some of my fire is always good. And she just is, and she has a keen sense of health. And, dietitians have a unique lens on life. Is they come from a very population base, whether it's the school-based lunch program or WIC programs. They're not paid individually a lot of times. They're seeing that more and more, and we're using them in our practices more as physical therapists. But, a lot of the education in dietetics has to deal with how do you change the health status of a population. So that's been really good for me to, remember that my undergrad is in dietetics, and that's how we met. So it's that has always been a good frame for me because they do look at how do we change systems and that systems thinking. And she's provided a lot of access on that. And she just is a good influence on that professionally, personally, and helps me stay in the right path when my boat's a little wobbly.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Salute to her.
Yeah, I think
yes.
I think it can be spouses, it can be colleagues, it can be mentors. I think it's critical for everyone to have a support system around them, and however they define that support system to really help them get the best out of themselves and be able to apply their talents in the best way possible.
It definitely takes a village. It definitely does. So, all right. Well, Alex, you want to put any wagers for EPL?
I mean, we lost 7-1 last time or some crazy. It's funny because my son's team, we had our game Saturday and we played the best team. My son plays rec. He's 7 years old, so it's nothing near competitive. But we lost 7-3 on Saturday. We played the best team in the league. They've been playing together, so it gave me back those bad memories of that Manchester United Liverpool game. So I'll just say, they're still in the Champions League.
Yep.
So,
who's going to finish third? Yeah, because it seems like Arsenal and City are pretty high up. Yeah. And I think the best of the rest is Man U, and then Liverpool's in 8th right now. So we gotta have a lot happen. And so we got to see.
Don't underestimate Mo Salah, though.
They look good today. They won 6-1 today, and so they look like they hit all their cylinders today. But their tough games left is they got Tottenham left and Villa. Villa looks good right now.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure given where they are on the table in the Premier League, the focus is probably more, as it should be, towards the Champions League and trying to do what they're doing there, and see how it goes.
Yep, exactly. It's a great sport, though. It is I don't know it. I'm starting to learn more and more about it, but it's such a great fan sport, such a good sport for my son's endurance and flexibility. When he moved from baseball to soccer, went through the roof. I mean, he just he's a runner now, and he just got an engine. So,
absolutely.
Well, it's definitely a sport that builds community. So, growing up, it was something that brought everyone together. Look at how the World Cup is.
Yeah,
it's just awesome. So I love it. It's my favorite sport. I'm used to calling it football. I'm used to saying physiotherapy. So being here has been like a total change, having to say soccer and physical therapy. But
physio and football.
Yeah.
Boots. I loved the commercial between Beckham and Peyton Manning. And they're calling them, chips versus fries, boots versus cleats, kits versus jerseys. That was funny. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that was a good ad too.
Well, listen, Justin, we want to thank you very much for being on with us. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to chat and getting to know you. A lot of good information. It's very pleasant to hear all the good stuff that is going on in the APTA, contrary to what some may believe and some may say. You guys have the eyes on the profession and what we need to do to continue to try to move forward. So thank you again. If there's ever anything that Mo or myself can do to help you guys out, please don't hesitate to reach out. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. You guys are doing a great job, and I appreciate you communicating the message of physical therapy out there. So appreciate it.
Thank you. You're welcome all the time.
You bet.
All right, and to all of our followers, thank you very much. Hank, always, make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms. Like, share, retweet, all that good stuff. We really do appreciate your support. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.